Good afternoon, namaskar. I have to admit I've had a doomsday view of the world for as long as I can remember. I believe the primary challenges of the future are going to be the lack of clean drinking water, nutritious food, and clean air. Ever since I became a mother, I was keen to save a piece of nature for my children and my family. I used to tell my husband, let's find a way to grow our own food and harvest our own water. But living in Mumbai with busy corporate lives and no background in farming, it sounded like a crazy idea to pursue. It was in 2010 that a friend of ours told us about permaculture. She said permaculture, or permanent agriculture, was a way of farming in which you create an ecosystem with plants, animals, birds, and insects, and they come together to create a highly productive food forest. It was a system of design that works with nature instead of against it, mimicking its patterns and using its forces to do most of the work. This idea captured our imagination, and we decided this was something we wanted to do. Within a few weeks, my husband left for Chandigarh, which is our hometown, in search of agricultural land. After nearly being conned by a bunch of property dealers, he zeroed in on a 6-acre piece of land on the foot of Morni Hills. The land had gentle slopes and a village pond, but no vegetation apart from half a dozen scraggy date palms. The soil was yellow, dry, and compacted. It had no organic life. It was simply dirt. In fact, our 6-year-old said, "Mama, you said we were buying a farm, and this looks like a desert." When we started designing the farm, we roped in a bunch of villagers from the nearby village, led by a supervisor fondly known as Panditji. Panditji was a farmer at heart, but to supplement his meager agricultural income, he had done various odd jobs like being a contractor, managed a poultry farm, and even run a street-side dhaba. When I shared our plans of growing food organically on this land, Panditji said, "Madam ji, yaha dawai ke bina kuch nahi hogega." He acknowledged that chemical farming had made farmers dependent on synthetic fertilizers, but maintained that without them, it was impossible to grow anything. Not just fertilizer, he told us that farmers were buying seeds, weedicides, and pesticides year on year, and this was drowning them in debt. "Is there any other way to farm?" he asked me. Well, I told him my research said there was, but decades of ravaging our earth will take some time to build back. Systematic destruction of our soils will need some investment to make them fertile again. We had been taking from our planet for so long, we would have to give back just a little. In the monsoon of 2011, when we arrived at the farm to start work, we were in for a shock. Our farm was completely flooded with a rainwater deluge from the nearby Morni Hills. Water flowed down the slopes with such severe intensity, it took with it precious topsoil and destroyed several structures on the way. What was even more shocking was that the next day, the sun was out and there wasn't a drop of water on the land. It had all run off within 24 hours. Our permaculture books told us that we had to manage this water. We had to slow it down, soak it in, and store it. So we started by building swales. Swales are trenches that you build around contour lines, and these act as speed breakers for when water flows down the hill. We then built a channel which would give a defined path to the water as it flowed through the land and found its way to the ponds. We lined these channels with bamboos, date palms, grasses, which would slow down the water and clean it. And finally, we dug 2 large ponds and 4 shallow pools to collect and store this water. Within a few years, our water management was completely in place, and today, water flows through our land like a song. Whenever it rains, not a drop leaves our property, and on good days of rainfall, we collect up to 5 million liters of water. I have to admit, one of my favorite sights in the world is to watch water flow through our farm. The first step in giving back to the planet is planting trees. We decided to plant 1,000 trees to start with. Panditji was appalled at this plan. He said, Madam ji, no farmer plants trees on their land because you cannot grow crops in the shade of the trees. He also warned us that if you plant trees on your land, the value of your property will drop dramatically because no buyer wants to buy land with trees on it. We explained to Panditji that in permaculture, trees are at the heart of the design. They give permanence to the farm. They help build an ecosystem. They hold the soil in place. They build groundwater and build the fertility of the soil. They also provide useful biomass, which helps to fertilize the topsoil. So it was important for us to plant these trees. Eventually, a reluctant Panditji helped us plant over 5,000 trees over the years, ranging from fruits to flowering to avenue, medicinal, and native trees. And this is what makes up our food forest today. When I say trees, I have to tell you, these were tiny saplings, some of which were not even a foot tall. And my husband was convinced that they would never grow up to be full-fledged trees and that we were just wasting our time and money. But watching these trees grow year on year has been one of the most rewarding experiences of our life. Today, these trees provide a microclimate on our farm and are home to many species of birds. At the heart of growing anything and food is the quality of soil. To improve the quality of soil, we started adding cow manure. So we would add cow manure and find some temporary improvement in fertility, but then things would very quickly return back to their original lifeless state. What we didn't know back then was that soil is a living organism comprising of billions of bacteria, fungi, worms, and creepy crawlies of all sorts. For this life to sustain, it needs organic matter and moisture. And by the mistake we were making was that we were keeping our soils uncovered and dry, which was killing the life within. Tilling is the process of turning the soil over, either by hand or with a tractor. When you turn the soil over, you expose it to the sun, thereby drying it out and killing the life within. A related problem is that of weeds, because whenever you leave the soil uncovered, weeds will grow very quickly. Just like skin will always cover a wound on your body, weeds will always cover exposed soil. And what we were doing by repeated tilling was equivalent to scraping off the scab on our wound, thereby never allowing the wound to heal itself. The act of keeping your soils covered is called mulching. When you mulch your soils, weeds do not grow. And when weeds do not grow, you do not need to till. So what we learned was that we had to do three things. We had to add the cow manure, we had to start mulching, and we had to stop tilling. In the first summer, after planting our saplings, the farm help was running from pillar to post, trying to keep them hydrated in the 46 degrees Celsius heat. Panditji called frantically and said, Madam ji, kuch karna padega. I knew we had to do something, and my internet research told me that we should be mulching the sapling with some woody, leafy matter. The problem was we had none. A chain of phone calls led me to a nearby wood chip processing unit, and I ordered a truckload. We took these wood chips and mulched all our 1,000 saplings with the wood chips. And this prevented the evaporation losses dramatically and brought down our frequency of watering from twice a day to twice a week instead. With such a dramatic saving of water and effort, Panditji was impressed and convinced that mulching was a good thing to do. But it was still difficult to get him to stop tilling, and it still is. And I don't blame him, because every time you harvest a crop and leave the field bare, weeds grow very quickly on it. To prevent that, we have to tractor the soil again before we can sow our next crop. There is only one way to break the cycle, and that is to mulch our soils extensively. But where can a farmer find such large quantities of mulch? By planting an ecosystem of trees, which are now 30 to 40 feet in height, we use the branches and prunings of these trees to make mulch our raised beds and fields. By planting an ecosystem of trees, we have created our own in-house mulch factory. Today, Our soils are sweet-smelling, moist, and filled with life. We can dig a pit anywhere on the farm and we'll find a handful of earthworms. Panditji says the soil reminds him of what he saw as a child in the nearby Morni Hills. The bacteria and the fungus in the soil are constantly breaking down nutrients and mining minerals from the stones and pebbles. Think of it as a worldwide web under the ground, where nutrients are flowing from one part to the other and being made available to plants just in time. It's a fascinating world out there, and it is safe to assume that we know as little about the soil beneath our feet as we do about the stars above our head. By 2013, our farm was beginning to resemble a permaculture farm. We were now looking forward to a harvest of fruits, vegetables, cereals, and pulses. We enthusiastically planted saplings in our raised beds and sowed seeds in our field. But after a few weeks when we visited the farm, we found that most of our crops were destroyed by pests. We were really disappointed that after all our hard work and planning, we had lost crops to pest attack. Panditji had his "I told you so" moment because he had constantly warned us about farming without chemicals. I reached out into my organic farmer network to find out why this was happening, and what I learned was this. We were not doing a few things which we should have done. One, our plants had low immunity because of the absence of nutrients in the soil. This made them very vulnerable to pest attack. Two, there were no natural predators like birds and lizards on the farm. And third, we should be intercropping and companion planting so that no insect found a never-ending stretch of food to feast on. As we built this nutrient cycle, an important role was played by the animals. On a farm, every animal, including man, has to earn its keep. A farm is nothing without the diversity of life that animals, birds, and bees bring to it. And we feel blessed that we are able to share this space with them. A chemical farm is not an ecosystem. It's a stretch of lifeless soil in which food is grown artificially with the help of chemicals and machines. The food is filled with harmful chemicals, which is causing havoc with our health. There have been instances in the last 8 years that we've lost dogs who simply drank the water from a neighboring rice field. This is the same food that you and I are consuming, and there's no surprise that there's so much sickness all around us. A permaculture farm, in contrast, is a happy place. It's pure and spiritual. Here we work with nature, and nature gives us back by leaps and bounds. Once the flywheel of trees, water management, and soil restoration is set into motion, the productivity of the farm increases year on year. Today, we are fully self-sufficient as a farm. We save our own seed, produce our own mulch, harvest our own rainwater, and have loads of manure. We grow over 100 crops, ranging from cereals to pulses to oil seeds, fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, sugarcane, and even cotton. Panditji is finally convinced that yes, it is possible to grow organic food without chemicals. We went in search of uncontaminated food and water, but we got so much more on this journey. Our children started spending more time with nature than at malls and restaurants. I'm proud that they can identify species of trees, have a lot of compassion for animals, and are conscious of their own carbon footprint. They have done their fair share in turning what looked like a desert back then into a lush green food forest today. We turned vegetarian when we realized that the animals we play with are the animals we eat. We started evaluating industrial products for their utility instead of their fashion value. Now, things no longer seem attractive to buy. We are slowing down our own consumption and living more consciously. Today, we can put a nice meal on the table that's almost entirely grown by us. We eat healthy, homegrown food, harvest millions of liters of water, and our farm is an oxygen factory. Our friends tell us that this is a luxury, but we believe this is a necessity. For if health is wealth, then growing your own food is the new gold. You may be wondering that why don't all farmers practice permaculture? It is because our farmers are dependent on their next crop for their livelihood. They do not have the luxury to let go of a few cycles and allow the earth to rejuvenate itself. This permaculture movement has to be led by people like you and me. Us urban folk who have taken so much from the planet that today our air is polluted, our water is contaminated, and our food is devoid of any nutrients. It is time for us to give back, if not for the planet, then for us ourselves and for our own survival. For if we don't have nutrient-filled food to eat, clean air to breathe, and fresh water to drink, what kind of a life are we leading anyways? So I invite you all to do something as crazy as what my family and I have done. Adopt a piece of land in your neighborhood, in your school, outside your city, in your village. Restore it, nurture it, and then enjoy the bounty of nature for your lifetime. Remember what Steve Jobs said. Those who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Thank you.